Good morning and welcome to Policing TV. I'm delighted to be here in West Mercia Police's headquarters with Chief Constable Alex Murray. Alex, thank you so much for inviting Policing TV here to near Worcester. West Mercia is a concept that some, bearing in mind our international audience, may not be too familiar with. So let's start by just giving us a little bit of background about what is West Mercia, where are we at the moment, and how big a force are we talking about here?
So it's interesting, isn't it? Because West Mercia isn't actually named after a place, but you do have in medieval times the Mercian Kingdom, and it's named after that, really. We cover a number of counties, so we cover Telford and Wrekin, Shropshire, Herefordshire and Worcestershire. We're a massive police force geographically, fourth biggest in the country. We've got about 5,000 staff and about half of those are police officers. And it covers both rural areas but also urban areas like the cities of Telford, Shrewsbury, Worcester.
It's one of the most beautiful headquarters in my opinion, in the United Kingdom. I shouldn't really be saying that on camera, should I? Because others will complain, but it is genuinely beautiful, this area, and I hope we'll capture some of that in the videos that we're recording. But it must be a great place to work here, I guess.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's a hugely varied area. Our officers have to cover a vast geography. And it's interesting, so I've worked in London, I've worked in West Mids, and now I've worked in West Mercia. There can sometimes be that sort of snobbery associated with urban-only police forces. It doesn't need to be like that. My officers deal with everything that other forces deal with. And when we're talking about rural crime, people think, well, what's that? People joke about sheep rustling and stuff like that. Organised, acquisitive crime, stealing farm machinery is a real problem for us, as well as some issues associated with farming land and other areas. So it's a really fascinating place for people to work.
So what brought you into policing in the first place? What led you to become, or to apply to become a police constable?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think everyone's got their own sort of roots in, haven't they? But I grew up as an army child, so I was born in Cyprus, grew up in Germany, went to school in Kent, and then ended up at Birmingham University. So that was my brush with the Midlands. First time I came here, and it feels like home now. And I remember always through my childhood wanting my job to be an adventure with a purpose. Now, there was a book I read once called To the Source of the Yangtze by a guy called Dick Bell, who took a hovercraft up the Yangtze to find its source in China. And all the way through this book, he said he wanted to have an adventure with a purpose. And I remember reading it. And I then went on some hovercraft expeditions. But I thought, I want a job that is an adventure with a purpose. And I remember like the penny drop moment when I was at university, thinking as a young lad, so forgive the simplicity of it. So I get to chase robbers, which is the adventure. I get to please the victim, and I get paid. Right. So you put those three things together, why would I not want to become a police officer? So I joined West Midlands Police, and my uncle at the time was a senior police officer in the Isle of Man, and ex-GMP, and I spent some time with him, and I thought, this is going to be great. And he's always been an example, and sadly my cousin, his son, was an officer called Stephen Oak, who was murdered in Manchester on duty by a terrorist called Kamal Burgas. So as you grow up in policing, you realise the hidden depths, issues, troubles, pressures and challenges. But why I joined the police was that really I thought this is an occupation that gives me an adventure with a purpose, and I was just totally set on it.
So you've referred there to a particular tragedy that befell an officer within your family unit. So there are some bleak times associated with policing. In the wider sense, though, has policing fulfilled its promise, or what you hoped it would be, of adventure with a purpose?
Yeah, every day. Every day, at every rank, in every city, in every area we work in. Now, loads of it is unglamorous, and the more you go up the ranks, actually in every rank there's unglamorous stuff. There's paperwork, there's policy, there's practice that you don't agree with. You think, why am I doing this? But at the end of the day, scrape that away, definitely park the cynicism. And when you're dealing with a victim or with an offender, getting justice, you sometimes need to be able to pinch yourself and go, do you know what? No one else has access to making this amount of difference. No charity, no educational establishment. The police are there first, and that's your job, and you can make a profound difference there. And what you do really matters for most people for the rest of their life. So I don't know the scrapes you've had with policing, but I bet you can recount them, and you can remember how the officer behaved, and you can remember how it felt, and you'll probably tell lots of other people. And we need to remember that it's a privilege, and and that's the impact that we can make.
Take us through some key highlights in your career. You've mentioned West Midlands. You went to the Met. You're now here at West Mercia. I do want to come back to some of the real challenges that you've experienced, but take us through a selection of the times that have made it all worthwhile to you. What do you remember with pride or satisfaction or just enjoyment?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think everyone has to reflect on what makes them tick. And for me, it's about thinking I was involved in this decision that has made a difference for, particularly at a senior rank, that has changed the way we've delivered policing, that's either improved morale, improved the service we deliver, improved justice outcomes. Thinking I was part of that is a key tenet for what makes me tick. I particularly enjoy learning. I particularly enjoy trying things differently. And all the way through my career, I've experimented with different ways of working. Some have been a complete failure and some have been successful. But highlights often refer to people. So in the Met, I was privileged enough to work in the serious organised crime space, specialist crime, which was fantastic. Everything from human trafficking through to cybercrime, online child sexual exploitation, dealing with criticality day after day after day, moving into tackling violence, and while I was there, we had a record amount of teenagers murdered in London. So, bringing together the policing response and the community response and the system response to tackling ingrained levels of violence in London was a huge privilege. And I think about some of the community activists I work with, some of the policing interventions we delivered around focused deterrence, hotspot policing, problem-orientated policing. Really a pleasure to be involved in that, working with a much wider team. And then in West Mids, where I cut my teeth, and then I left as a temporary ACC crime. Most of my service has been in the crime space, was great, and just knowing the geography, learning the area, and going from a PC on the ground up the ranks and feeling that sort of social capital, knowing the system, knowing the place, and learning to love the place. Really good. And then coming here as a deputy chief constable and now a chief constable. Again, it's the people and the change that we can make. West Mercia is doing a lot. We've just changed our vision. So not many police services have the vision we've got, but we are a people-led, tech-enabled crime-fighting organisation. That's how I've labelled it. And it is great watching our staff develop, watching the huge strides we're making on technology, and we've got a long way to go there, and also that focus on getting crime down, as well as bringing offenders to justice, and the wider area. So there's so much to say in policing, and we've only got 5 minutes, so I can't.
You mentioned in that response that there's been highs and lows, there's been things that have worked and things that haven't. It reminds me of your current leadership of the Society of Evidence-Led Policing. We'll come on to that in a separate recording shortly, as we will your leadership of the National Police Chiefs Council AI portfolio. But the nature of evidence-led policing is that you try things and see whether they work or not. And sometimes they won't work. That's the nature of trying something a bit different. So what about some of the things, some of the challenging times? Do they relate to things that you thought would work and then didn't, or...
No, I mean, there are explicit examples, and the evidence-based approach means things are not doomed to failure or doomed to success. It means you're genuinely going to track outcomes and see if you made a difference or not. And there have been many experiments I've engaged in where you look at the data at the end of the day and you go, so it didn't work then, just ineffective. And many things where you go, wow, that had an impact. And you can say it with a level of certainty, which is what evidence-based policing is, because as senior officers, we'll say everything with a level of certainty if it makes us look good. And you can't do that if you're evidence-based. You've got to have integrity around your claims, cause and effect. And it's not those sort of things that are difficult. So I've done stuff that doesn't work, but that didn't frustrate me so much. I mean, I'd like to have had a greater impact in some areas. The things that are always bleak in policing are some of the tragedies you come across. So we've had a young boy here tortured to death, Alfie Steele, on our watch, and you look and reflect about things you could have done differently. Really big impact on the workforce. You know, that of course there is organisational learning, but just having stuff like that has a huge impact on the organisation, through to some of the gruesome homicides and levels of child sexual abuse. You know, policing, you are exposed to the worst in humanity on a regular basis. So that can have its effect. But I sort of think it's probably not that, and it's at different levels. So as a member of police staff or police officers, sometimes the stuff that I introduce really winds you up. I imagine, and I consider myself, when I was a PCC, you think, why am I doing this paperwork? Why do I currently have to redact a file that I'm sending to the Crown Prosecution Service, another public agency, just for advice on whether they're going to charge an individual? You know, huge bureaucracy. That can wind people up when demand is really high. And some of the demand issues, you know, most people love policing, but they get frustrated when demand outstrips supply, or they can't see the reason in doing what they want to do, or they don't have the equipment or tools to do what you need to do. And that's where you get real frustration. And then at a senior level, of course, decision making, working with our colleagues in government, working with under political accountability frameworks, both brings its benefits, because nobody wants to work in a police state where the police chief is in charge and not accountable to anyone. But similarly, you want to sometimes go off and do things and you have to be restrained, and that brings frustrations as well. So yeah, that's it. So the things that actually get me down is sometimes what winds me up is cynicism, right? And most police officers shouldn't and don't forget the privilege that they're in and the impact they can make on people's lives. But you do see sometimes, when I joined the police, my tutor, who had a pipe 30 years ago, told me that the job was effed, right? And I bet when he joined 30 years prior to that, his tutor would have told him the job's effed. It's like a thing, and it's not. And it's not now, and it won't be in the future. And so we just need to lift our gaze. And sometimes when I meet teams, and it's not in West Mercia, it's anywhere, and there's that sort of attitude that everything is rubbish, that I find that quite bleak. And it's my job to try and challenge and deal with that.
There are some challenges, of course, in wider society that policing has to individually and corporately deal with, whether it be media approaches that are looking for the negative story, or the challenges of reducing funds that are available. I think what we'll do is we'll pause this first recording in a moment or two, and then we'll go elsewhere. We're spoilt for choice here in West Mercia's headquarters as to scenic locations to move to. I hope that the rain is holding off. We'll talk about the Society for Evidence-Led Policing. We'll talk about your lead on AI, and we may find time to explore things a little further than that. But for the time being, Alex, Chief Constable Alex Murray, thank you very much indeed for that introduction to your career.
Thanks, Bernard.